What up, Marsh Pod? We are recording this on a Monday afternoon. We've got a new SP Top 25, and that's truthfully where we want to talk about because I think this latest one is interesting. It didn't give us much clarity in terms of who's there, who's a good basketball team, and where the SP voters might be leaning, because we had a lot of teams that did not play, and I think that's a big part of why some of the records are as Rick Blaze alluded to this morning. The records are not super indicative of who these teams are, right? Because the SEC, they've played a lot of games. Meanwhile, the Mountain West, the Big East, American conferences have not played quite as many. And so it's given us this distorted sample size, and I think we started to see that. Mountain West actually has a handful, but we've seen that sample size try to get back to normal, and that's why in the past week we had a lot of teams that did not play. A lot of the top 25 didn't suit up, didn't do anything. So we didn't see a lot of movement from teams that were in the same spot. So, for example, Alabama, number 2, number 3, Kentucky, 4, Georgia Tech, 5, Texas, all off, 7, Iowa, and Indiana, both off as well. So right there, you've got 6 of the top 10 teams did not play a game last week. Then you've got Georgetown, Memphis, San Diego State, Gonzaga, UConn, Maryland, Princeton, Villanova, Florida. All of them did not play. Clearly, the SP voters did not want to move things around, and I think they probably should have, with teams that didn't play. For example, South Carolina goes on the road, and they beat Butler in a big win. And they do not put they do not put South Carolina ahead of teams like Princeton, like Maryland, like UConn, like Gonzaga, because they didn't play. They didn't play, so why would you put somebody, I think that's the thought process, why would you put someone like South Carolina ahead of that? Or Davidson. Davidson jumps into the top 25. Those are the only two teams that added themselves to the top 25, South Carolina and Davidson. Well, Davidson beat South Carolina head-to-head, and despite the fact that South Carolina took down the then number 9 ranked Butler and now number 12, you still don't put South Carolina higher. And I think this is a little bit of a scare factor from the SP Top 25 to say, how can we move somebody up above somebody else simply because they didn't play? Just because they didn't play doesn't mean the sample size hasn't been good. South Carolina and Davidson have both been pretty good basketball teams as of late. What we did see, Mississippi State, despite the win, falls down to number 8. They were at number 6. Clearly, the SP voters did not value the win that they had against Wake Forest, being as close as it was in the first half. They didn't look like a dominant team, so they get dropped down below. We see Texas and Arkansas move up. Arkansas, Texas already had one. Arkansas swap spots with them. So it's interesting that the voters are taking a stance on a win, albeit not a great one, but not taking a stance against teams that didn't even play at all. Davidson and South Carolina, the two additions, I think, were good adds. But because there's so many teams that were off, it's questionable. Could you move down Memphis, San Diego State, Gonzaga, UConn, Maryland, Princeton, or Nova if they didn't play? I would think that you would, because I think South Carolina is better than them. At least they have been as of late. Maybe not the top half, because Memphis has been really good. San Diego State's been pretty good. Gonzaga and UConn have been really up and down. Maryland is suffering from the same sample size problem that we have. But clearly the SP voters did not value South Carolina enough, or they overvalued the bye week to say, well, they didn't do anything wrong, so how can we then hurt them for moving back? We're also getting a larger sample size. Teams are now eclipsing the 10-game mark, giving us more evidence of who they truly are. That is a good thing. If you go back to December 10th, at that point in time, there were 5 teams outside of the top 25 who were above 500. Kansas State, Arizona, USC, South Carolina. Now, there's 12. Louisville, Kansas State still. UNLV, Mexico, St. Mary's, New Mexico, St. Mary's, Minnesota, Rutgers, Utah, who at 9-6 and not in the top 25 is the first place technically because they had the best non-conference record in the Pac-12. So no Pac-12 teams are in the SP top 25. USC, Cal, UCLA, Washington State. You get a lot of those Pac-12 teams to round out that list. So 12 teams are above 500 and outside of the top 25. We used to have 5. That's a great piece of information because now we're getting better basketball. Okay, we're getting to know, all right, these teams that kind of beat up on each other, some of them are emerging as being a little bit better, right? Minnesota at 5-3. By the way, they just tied their total win-loss mark from last season, yet somebody still thinks that Minnesota's head coach should not be there. I disagree. You're getting a little bit more evidence. USC now at 8-6. Utah at 9-6. There's good basketball teams. I think we're going to see a little bit more activity at the bottom end of the top 25 because of that. Before, we just didn't have teams that were playing well enough to really justify them being in the top 25. If you go to the teams that are at 500, that adds another 7. Arizona, Ohio State, Michigan State, Nevada, St. John's, Baylor, and Houston. So we have 19 teams outside of the top 25 that are at or above 500. That's a good thing. The bad thing is, it means we're probably going to get, if this trend continues, some sub 500 teams in Hoopsteria. Let's do some quick math. 25 teams, top 25, all of them are above 500. Plus the 12 we just mentioned, plus the 7 that are at 500, that gives us 44 teams. 44 teams in SimWorld U that are at or above 500. That means, if Hoopsteria started today, 20 teams would be given a chance to win a national championship, yet be under 500 by at least one game, if not more. There are 9 teams that are under one game under 500. That's Temple, Jackson State, Texas Tech, VCU, Illinois, Michigan, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Auburn. So we add those 9, that gives us 53 teams at or above 500 or one game below 500. What's the point? What are we getting at? These are a bunch of numbers. What the hell is your point? I'm skeptical. Okay? I'm skeptical that we'll see too much hysteria in Hoopsteria. I know Rick this morning said Virginia Tech's losing in the second round. They're currently projected to be a number 3 seed. They're not losing in the second round. It would be a stunner. They could lose. Now I've said it. They're probably going to lose. But it would be stunning if Virginia Tech wins or loses in the second round of Hoopsteria. Because the bottom 5 seeds, assuming the committee puts sub-500 teams as lowest seeds, would all be 500 or below it. The bottom 5 seeds, so you're 16, you're 15, you're 14, you're 13, you're 12. All 5 of them would be under 500 if we started Hoopsteria today. So it's Auburn, is Illinois. Now those are 2 bad examples because Illinois has actually been playing pretty good. Is VCU going to beat Virginia Tech? Is Temple going to beat Virginia Tech? I would be stunned if that were to happen. It's got the makings of a not necessarily intense first round. I think there's a very real chance that an upset does not occur. So our top 20 teams in the country are going to lose to a below 500 team. That's what we're saying. I'm skeptical. Is it possible? Absolutely. Will it happen? Very well could. It's a one-game elimination, but I'm not holding my breath for any major upsets, even though I would love to be wrong. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday and, of course, every single morning on SimWorld today.